I really thought Aaron lost consciousness. I'm going to be completely honest. At one point, I think we're going to have to pull her off the stage. But you guys did an incredible job with the skit and the singing. Everything has been great. Thank you so much. Now, going to be completely honest, and I told him this a couple minutes ago. I was tempted to just play Charles Leitler's sermon, and I would just stand here and have it play. If this is your first time visiting, please, gbcoc.net, go to the sermon link and listen to last Sunday's service. An incredible job. Just highlighting the importance of true repentance in our lives. We're going to take a break, actually, from the parables, and we're going to be looking today at the concept of contact. Coming into contact with Jesus. There are 2 points today. Make contact and maintain contact. Make contact, maintain contact. We're going to be reading from Mark 5. Mark 5, we're going to start in verse 24. And before we get there, just an amendment on one of the announcements. For the family choir meeting, you'll actually be meeting in the Black Box Theater, not backstage. The family choir, Black Box, you'll be meeting today after service, not backstage. So Mark 5, we're going to read from verse 24b, so the second half of verse 24. It says, "A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him into the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, 'If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed.' Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she had freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around to the crowd and said, 'Who touched my clothes?' 'You see the people crowding against you,' his disciples asked, 'and yet you ask, Who touched me?' But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the truth. He said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering.'" Such an amazing passage of this woman's faith and Jesus' love. Just some background of what's going on here. Of course, you have this large crowd following Jesus. And at this point, of course you do, because Jesus is turning water into alcohol. He's feeding tons of people. He's like the coolest guy on campus at this point. Alcohol, lots of food. If you're sick, you go to him. If you have questions, you go to him. He's like the advisor that gives you food, and just, he's that guy. So very popular. People are following him. And then amongst the people is this woman who had this physical ailment. Now, we're not told exactly why, and why she was bleeding, but the fact that she would have been seen as being ceremonially unclean. Based on the Levitical law, this would be someone that people would have no desire to come into contact with. Their understanding of her is that God would have no desire to come into contact with her either. So she would have been like a loner of all loners. Nobody would want to be around her. She had no hope and no future. And then she even tried to fix it on her own. She went to doctors, spent all of her own money. You ever broken something and then try to fix it and it ends up significantly worse than where? So my parents went to Sierra Leone and went to do some mission work over there a couple years back, and the very small, very extremely poor, their church was on the side of the road somewhere because they can't afford a building. No sound equipment, anything. Extremely poor. As a thank you, all of them pitched in what to us would be pennies, but to them is groceries for a week. They pitched in money, and they bought my parents this incredibly handcrafted, it was the continent of Africa cut out of a piece of wood with like cola nuts on the base. The thing was beautiful. And they carved their name into where Sierra Leone is in the continent. They carved my parents' name into that spot to signify the mark they left on that country. It was beautiful. They brought it home, and Stephen thought, you know what'll make this better? If I mark all the other borders of the African countries, because then it's more realistic. So if I can just make all the other country borders on this map with no reference, and honestly, a very poor understanding of geography, but because of the varnish, the pen wouldn't stick, so I scratched it. I scratched all these invented countries into this incredible piece of artwork, and then I realized this was a bad idea. So I called my brother, and I said, hey, I know can you get me like an eraser or something? I gotta get the ink out. So then I spent a while just scrubbing it. I took off all the varnish. There's still these weird designs on it. This actually currently sits in my parents' living room right now still. But I ruined it. Now, there's an old African proverb that I made up that says, don't mess with your dad's stuff, especially when it took a lot of sacrifice to get that stuff. Yep. The point is, I try to fix it myself. I thought I could make it better. When I realized that I didn't, I tried to fix it some more, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. You know what's crazy about this? Is that as ridiculous as that is, it's more ridiculous to think that you need to fix yourself and then go to God. Let me get my life together. There's a lot of craziness in my life. Let me fix all of that, and when I'm better, I'll come to God. Let me heal my disease and then go to the hospital. Let me get in the best shape of my life and then go to the gym. Like these things are ridiculous, but what's even more ridiculous is the idea that you can spiritually heal yourself as a precursor to a relationship with God. Does not work that way. If she would have tried to continue on this path of let me just fix me, she never gets healed. So for us, we need to understand that there is no point better to come to Christ than at the point where you feel you need help, that you need to be fixed. You cannot do that on your own. You need to make contact with Jesus. She realized that she was stuck. She realized that continuing to go to man was going to get her stuck, that continuing to go to money was going to get her stuck. And then the thought process here is, well, if Jesus is who he claims to be, then I need to make contact with Jesus. She was determined, she was devoted, she was dedicated, she was undaunted. She decided that I am going to make contact with Jesus. Without that heart, the next step is impossible. Without the dedication, the devotion, the determination, without that, making the steps toward him is impossible. Now, I got to ask, not rhetorically at all, but when was the last time you felt determined, devoted, dedicated, and undaunted to get into contact with Jesus? Not rhetorical, because if it's not every day, if the answer to that is not on a daily basis, then it's possible that you could be in that crowd around Jesus, touching Jesus, walking with Jesus, but not actually contacting Jesus because you don't understand what he's there for. Like, Jesus isn't just here to be a nice idea, that's who I'm following. We're supposed to be in constant contact with him. And without that, you can walk alongside him, watch his miracles, watch all the stuff, but never actually be in contact with him. Again, without this heart, the next step is impossible. So this woman's faith to think all this was incredible. Her heart to be, I need to get in contact with him was incredible. But as amazing as her faith and heart was, had she stayed where she was, in complete conviction that Jesus could fix her, no doubt in my mind, Jesus can fix me, but I'm going to stay right here, she doesn't get healed. Faith without follow-through is futile. I'll say it again. Faith without follow-through is futile. Now, what's amazing is that so down the line, Jesus tells her, your faith has healed you. So the thing that actually, it's her faith in Jesus that heals her, but had she sat on that, what a waste. What a waste of life-changing faith to just have it and not go to Jesus, and not push through the crowd, and not do what you need to do to get closer to Jesus with all intellectual understanding of who he is. What a waste to continually come into church, believe all this stuff, but not actually change. What a waste of all these parables that are presenting literally the words of Jesus to us, and we're moved, and Sundays are great, and then nothing changes. Life-changing faith is sitting in our pockets when we decide to not take the steps to follow Jesus. Faith without follow-through is futile. So her thinking is, if I can just make contact with Jesus, if I can just make contact with him, and now I'm going to push my way through the crowd. This needs to be our heart every day. If I just need to grab onto Jesus today, not just once when I thought things were going bad, but on a daily basis, I need to fight through to make contact with Jesus. So she pushes through the crowd to get to him. And now, whether people knew about her sickness it's not made clear, but it's not as important as the fact that she knew. Like, she knows that she's in a bad place. She knows that she needs to get extremely vulnerable and extremely uncomfortable to make this work, but she was willing to be inconvenienced by the obstacles that got in the way of her and Jesus. Lots of things can get in the way between us and Jesus. Friends, family, fears, failure. There's so much that can inconvenience. This would be very easy if you could just jump and skip and it'd be rainbows and unicorns everywhere en route to a relationship with Jesus. Unfortunately, because of how much he had to suffer to make this available to us, there is no way that we're just going to be able to casually slide into contact with him. There will be obstacles, and there will be things that could seem as an inconvenience to get in the way of us coming into contact with him. This past summer, my family and I went to Ecuador for a week and a half. This is where my mom's from. She hadn't been back in about 30 years. She hadn't been back. I had never gone. No one in my family, other than, of course, her side, had been there ever. Got to tell you, it felt amazing to be 1.5 feet taller than everybody in an entire country. I felt like, I'm sure what athletes feel like when they walk around the regular, us. Now I did, the downside to that is that my brother and I went to a soccer game, and we stuck out like tall, sore thumbs. And these kids tried to jump us and steal our monies. But they were small, so I was like, get out of here. Get out of here, man. But what I found out is that they were trying to steal our money outside the stadium to buy tickets to the game. Like that's what happens. These kids hang around the stadium, rob tourists for money to just go watch the game. Like, soccer is a really, really big deal here. So much so that what I also saw was kids, boys and girls, probably from the age of like 2 right through to what looked like college age, walking in the streets in the middle of the day with soccer cleats. And I thought, they're probably on their way to or on their way from soccer. But what I found out was that most of these families can only afford to get their children 1 pair of shoes. And they love soccer so much that in their mind, just get me the cleats, and I'll use that as my regular shoes because of how much I love what playing soccer is like. I'll deal with the inconvenience of walking around in these cleats when I'm not playing if I have the guarantee that I'm going to have these when I need to play. We have too many shoes here. We have too many options. Too many, this is inconvenient, I'm just going to take these off now and put on my work shoes. I'm going to put on my friendships with these people's shoes. I'm going to put on my family time shoes. And it's like the inconvenience of Christianity prevents us from walking in Christ's footsteps because our closets are full. We just have way too many choices. And the existence of choices by itself is not wrong, but when you find yourself in and out of commitment, not commitment, halfway in, when it gets hard, step back. You get challenged about something and you draw back. You fail once and you draw back. Well, it's because you have that option. These kids they have to wear the shoes, no matter what, because in their mind, this is the best thing in the world. We got to be careful that we don't start seeing inconvenience as God not working and God not moving. Too many shoes, too many options. I'm going to push through the inconvenience of walking in Christ's footsteps if it means that I can get closer to him. These kids in Ecuador get it. And I think with, great financial opportunities comes sometimes great laziness. And we have to make sure that we don't fall into that as well. Whatever it takes was her thought process. Whatever it takes. But I think the part that I miss actually every single time that I've read this, in verse 30. In verse 30, in this idea of making contact with Jesus. Just lost my spot. In verse 30, at once Jesus realized that power had gone from him. Like Jesus feels the physical effect of her iniquities. Like he actually feels that as a deficit. And I guess because I understand and believe that Jesus is in fact God, I also kind of attribute a sense of like unlimited stamina to him. Like when he does miracles, when he all this teaching, all this love, whatever. Well, he's God, so he's able to do it. But what I never considered is how exhausting this must have been for Jesus all the time. Like I have one kid, one child, one baby, one newborn, one 7.5-month-old. There are times that I feel like I have 11 of them. Not the campus ministry. The Lucas. He's like the tripolar, bipolar. He's so many people. He's got so many needs, and you're like, oh, I'm going to rest now. Nope, Lucas is up. And I can't imagine how much Hannah has to do because she's trying to hold him for as long as she can because he's going to be bigger than her, next year. So she just the amount of work and attention, and it's exhausting. If you have more than one child, God bless you so much. I cannot imagine how challenging that must be at times. But then you love the child, so you do it. You go through the difficulties, you go through the stress, you accept being tired as just what it is. Jesus, through all of his interact, all his contact with people, sure, they were contacting him, but when that contact happens, Jesus feels it. And maybe this is common knowledge for everyone else, and I'm just kind of catching on to this really, really slow, but he felt everyone's problems, and it affected him physically. It affected him emotionally. It affected him spiritually because of our shortcomings. So contacting him really affects him a lot. And then that makes me think about, you just write down, so in Isaiah 59, 1 and 2, what's presented is this, the spiritual state of mankind, that when we sin, we end up separated from God. And what I had kind of always understood from a very, very poorly condensed version of what's happening here is that sin, God is like repulsed by sin, and he can have nothing to do with it, wants no connection, can make no contact, turns his back from you, forsakes you because of sin. But a couple of years back, I was actually going to Hannah's birthday party, trying to impress her, as you do when you're trying to impress a girl. And my parents made me take my little brother with me, which completely conflicts with my trying to impress Hannah strategy. And so we're in New York, and we're taking to get from my house to where Hannah was having the birthday dinner. It was like 3 different trains that we had to take. And if you're familiar with the New York subway system, it works very well if you know how to work it. So what happened was that I told Andrew, just stick with me, and we'll get to Hannah's thing. Just don't, try to keep your distance at some points, please, because I'm trying to impress this girl. And then at one point, if you're familiar, there are certain trains that are a lot less forgiving when the doors close. Like there's some that you touch a little bit and it's back up, but some of them, you would think the train itself is angry because the doors, it'll try and squash you inside. And we were I fell asleep, woke up at our stop. I'm like, Andrew, let's go. And I stepped out, I'm like, great, we made it. And I look back and the doors close on my little brother's face while he's inside the train. Now, if I'm 16, no, if I'm 15 at this point, Andrew is 12. But when my brother was 12, he was 6. So he matured like 9 years in 2 years. But when he was 12, he was a 6-year-old. So this little baby is stuck behind the thing, and I lost it. I'm smacking the glass. He was smart. He ended up getting off at the next stop and just grabbing someone's phone and calling my dad. I waited for the next train, took the train loop. My dad had already kind of set up someone to pick up Andrew and take him to Hannah's spot. I'm out here like, I can't, what am I gonna, I gotta tell my dad that I lost Andrew. That Hannah's never gonna like me then if I lost my brother. Like this is the worst day ever. But that moment of separation, it wasn't like, well, he's gone now. because now there's this thing that's separating us. I guess there's nothing, sorry, but because the contact is impossible, I don't want any parts of him. I would have punched through that glass if it would meant that I could get to him. So in our separation from contact with Jesus, when Jesus dies on the cross, it's not just this, I can't, because of their sin, they're far from me, and I have to forsake them. I can imagine God trying to punch through the glass to get us. Like when we sin and separate ourselves, he still loves us the same. It doesn't reduce the love or reduce the desire to come into contact with us. So he tries to force himself through. It completely changed the way that I look at the cross now. Because in this sacrifice, so God has to think, I want them so much that I'm going to tear through my child to get to them. So when we get a chance to come into contact with Jesus, we got to understand that the person that did most of the work is him. Jesus, in having the power leave him, is a lot more work than what it took to work through the crowd to get to him. That whatever you feel like you have to sacrifice or give up or stop doing, if you for 1 second just think, Christ loved me, God loved me so much that he tore through his child to get to me, it makes it a lot harder to justify sin. It makes it a lot harder to justify lukewarmness or mediocrity when you see how much needed to be done for you for contact to even be possible. So when you think I need to make contact, you should be inspired and motivated by the fact that, well, God felt the same way. I need to make contact with this bleeding woman, so power is going to leave my child. I need to make contact with a sinful world, so my son is going to die, so that they can reach out and touch me. We need to make contact with Jesus, but that only is possible because of how much was sacrificed for us. Now we need to also maintain contact, and we're going to close with this. Acts 4. Acts 4, we're going to read from 13. Actually, I'm sorry, we'll read from verse 8. So the truth is, we don't know what happened to this woman after this. She gets healed, but there's no recording of what happens to her life afterwards. We also don't know what happens to Barabbas. If you're familiar with the story, Barabbas and Jesus are on trial, and Barabbas is set free, even though he's the criminal there, and Jesus is sent to be crucified. We don't really know what happened with Lazarus after he gets raised from the dead, other than down the line it says that he was spending time with Jesus. But after that, we don't know. All of these instances of Jesus healing people, raising from the dead, driving out demons, we don't know what happened to them afterwards. Imagine how heartbreaking it would be if somehow they find and canonize another chapter of something that's this woman's diary entry, and it says, "Man, today I got healed by Jesus. This is amazing. All the stuff that I wasn't able to do, I'm gonna go do." And then you watch the diary entry, and she starts going further and further away from God, and back into. Now I get a chance to experience the world and ruin myself again with sin. Imagine how depressing that would be, to hear that Barabbas, after being set free when he should have deserved death, imagine if he goes back and lives the same life he was living before. Imagine if Lazarus, after being raised from the dead, goes back to a risky life separate from God's instruction. It's really, really sad if that's the case. See, contact with Jesus is incredible. Contact with Jesus is life-changing. But if you don't maintain the contact, it's fireworks. Great. That was incredible. But no one remembers fireworks on July 6th. You don't, because it's done. It's gone. It's over. It's no longer relevant. You got to wait for the next year to come before it becomes relevant again. If that's the way we treat contact with Jesus, that's not a relationship. There's no relationship if I decide to talk to my wife once a week. There's no relationship in a friend if you choose to, okay, we're gonna have one conversation a month only when I'm in need. That's not a relationship. Sure, the contact is there and changing, but without a maintenance of that contact, it's pointless. It's fireworks. Acts 4, in verse 8, as we close, says, "Then Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, 'Rulers and elders of the people, if we are being called to account today for the act of kindness shown to a man who was lame and are being asked how he was healed, then know this, you and all people of Israel, it is by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, but whom God raised from the dead, that this man stands before us healed. Jesus is the stone you builders rejected, which has become the cornerstone. Salvation is found in no one else, for there's no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved.' When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus." When they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. They were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus. If it's not obvious to the people that you come into contact with at school, at work, amongst your families, strangers on a daily basis, if it is not obvious that you have made and maintained contact with Jesus, I challenge you to reevaluate the maintenance. All Peter does here is say what is inside him, what he's motivated by, what he decided to live every single day based on. His 3 years with Jesus led to his entire life being changed. Everything about this man's life showed that I made and maintained contact with Jesus, and he died a while back. But I am living the life that he would be living right now. If our lives don't show what Christ is trying to live through us, you can't maintain contact. How is that possible? How can we walk as if Christ is in us and not go where Christ is going? How can we claim that we have Jesus in us and not do what he says to do? It doesn't make sense. That's how you maintain contact. You follow Christ, not just for miracles, but for the life, for every single aspect of your life. And I think if you look at it as, well, that's a burden, then you've forgotten his power to heal. Now, I think what we all want is for this woman to leave celebrating the victory of her being cleansed, and then follow Christ for the rest of her life. That's what and then if she ever has to think back to why, well, that's why I'm healed. That's why I'm clean. That's why I'm able to do what I'm able to do now. I hope that it doesn't take traumatic instances like this for us to see our need for Jesus on a daily basis. Things could be going great right now. You could feel like, well, I understand the need for Christianity, but I think I'll understand my need better when I actually need it. You do. You may not see it, the mirror may not show it, your friends may not notice. But separate from Christ, you're dying. It's a very sad existence. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't change the fact that it's true. And what Jesus says, make contact with me. I promise you I will change your life. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, make contact with me and then maintain it as a genuine relationship with me, and you'll be fine. Forever. Now, there's not a lot of stuff that can offer that. Actually, nothing. Nothing can offer, just do this, and you'll be fine no matter what. The fact that Jesus, this woman had to, if he is who he says he is, I need to go. Church, if Jesus is who he says he is, we need to go. Grab onto him. The other day, my son Lucas was trying to grab the sun ray that was on the table. Like, trying to grab it, look at his hand. And in my foolishness, I thought he was wrong. In my wisdom masked fear, I thought, Lucas, that's not how it works. We got to reach for the light. Reach for Christ. Hold on to him. Holding on to other stuff is going to kill you. Holding on to Christ gives you life, and life eternal. And you have an opportunity to do that today. Not when you fix yourself, but in order to fix yourself. Grab onto Jesus, make contact, maintain contact. To God be the glory.